I don't know how many out of you out there have a cat. Those of you that do will know that they are independently minded. If a cat goes into a room of people, there is probably one person that hates cats and is sitting there with a look of silent terror as the cat slowly sidles up to them, crouches down, then leaps onto their lap, then curling up and going to sleep. Then there's the play-non-play routine, whereby the cat attacks your foot in order to get you to play. You go over to where her special fishing rod is kept. It's a rod with a piece of string with a catnip mouse on the end. After one desultory swipe, the cat stalks off with her tail in the air. The word contrary springs to mind. There are some people who, whatever you do, it's wrong. It's too hot, or it's too cold, or the tea is too strong, or there's too much milk or too little. And there's something about this in the Gospel reading. The reading is split into two parts. The first refers to this generation, in other words, the people who are said to be like some kind of children's game, which involves a taunting song. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. In other words, some flute players and melancholy singers played and then wailed, but the audience just did not engage with them at all. So which set of people are this generation? Are they the performers or the audience that are indifferent to both the upbeat and wailing performances? The people that would neither dance nor mourn? Of course they're being likened with the latter. Jesus is telling them that they neither engaged with John the Baptist nor with himself, despite their contrasting styles. John the Baptist could be described as the wailer. He was ascetic, dressed roughly, and as Matthew described him, neither eating nor drinking. His was a mournful style. But the people would neither repent nor mourn, instead accusing him of being possessed by a demon. Jesus, in contrast, was the flute player. He brought merriment. His promise was a kingdom full of joy. He was the bringer of healing and hope. But the generation accused him of being a glutton and a drunkard. He associated with tax collectors and sinners. They stayed glued to their seats and refused to dance. So was it that this generation did not want to respond? After all, they'd been given every opportunity to respond, and yet they did not. Given that they did not engage with either, whether it's their theology or their style, they thought it wise to hold back. But who is wise? Is it the person who has preconceived ideas about how God's salvation is to be packaged? Or is it the person who sees what's really going on? That the blind receive their sight, that the people with leprosy are healed. So this is a natural leap to the second part of the reading, where we have another contrast between the wise and babies. Now we know that youngsters are more disposed to take things at face value. It's only with age that skepticism and cynicism creep in. So those with the presumed wisdom, the Pharisees and scribes, the rich, the intelligent and learned, the salvation is denied them, whereas those who are babies in spiritual terms, the lonely, the poor and the weak, God's salvation has been revealed to them, and it is for this that Jesus gives thanks. On one level, this might seem rather odd, but really, it's about how the gospel is received. Firstly, Jesus gives thanks that the gospel is well received amongst the lowly and those in need, those he calls the infants. There's something about being in need and knowing it, about realizing that one cannot rely on one's own strength alone. And that means that such people are open to the message of God's grace. Secondly, Jesus' prayer acknowledges the fact that although the gospel is given freely for all, the reality is that there are those who consider themselves as wise and not in need of the salvation that God provides through him. It's hard to receive the message of Christ from a position of power. In a sense, it remains hidden from them as unacceptable. But really, it's those who are humble enough to receive the good news that will accept it. And thirdly, despite the scorn that the powerful and so-called wise may pour over Jesus' mission to the weak and helpless, ultimately it is this that's the nature of God. Human rejection of the gospel cannot overturn God's merciful will. Those who do come to Christ are promised that their heavy burdens and weariness can be cast upon him, and they are promised rest. But this rest is not like the adverts for a bed at Premier Inn that guarantees a perfect night's sleep or your money back. What Jesus promises instead is a yoke. But that's really odd, because into yoke a thing an oxen wears when pulling a cart or a plough. Now, the yoke was a symbol in Judaism of the law and wisdom of God. So here it symbolizes obedience to the commandments of the kingdom of heaven. It's about being willing to serve others with humility and mercy. The yoke is easy and the burden is light, not because life is made easy, rather the reverse. It might even involve the picking of a path of difficulty, or even the picking up of a cross. But because it is the way of God, and if it is the way of God, then it is satisfying for our souls. There are many for whom this message is not what they want to hear. Maybe they are this generation and perversely walk away from the good news that is Jesus Christ. Yet for those who could choose to serve alongside Christ in the name of God, they will ultimately hear the divine word of blessing. Well done, good and faithful servant. Amen.